Hello and welcome to my podcast, Living in My Shadow. I'm Sandra Wallace. I'm an OCD, anxiety, and depression coach, and I have the honor today of having a guest by the name of Sarah McNutt. She is a dietitian. She has been a dietitian for 3 years. She graduated 3 years ago in Manitoba, Canada, and works at the Health Science Center. She's passionate about teaching people about health and how food connects with our overall health. So I'm really looking forward to our session this evening with Sarah, and I want to thank you all for being here and being a part of it because health does matter. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So we have some questions that a lot of people are asking, more common questions that people ask as it associates with living with in our line of work with OCD and anxiety. And if you feel like you want to add anything else in there about other mental health issues or just things in general, by all means do so, okay? So we're
Perfect.
going to start with the first question. How does diet impact OCD and anxiety symptoms?
So, in general, diet is such a big part of our lives. There are a lot of different symptoms that come along with OCD and anxiety, and certain parts of our diet or certain nutrients, how we're feeding our body, can help to alleviate some of that stress, or it can help to contribute to some of those unfortunate symptoms that obviously people want to avoid happening. And sometimes people don't realize how important diet is in helping to address those symptoms, and sometimes changing the diet and how it will help changing those symptoms.
Oh, great. And the other question I had from the audience is, are there specific foods or nutrients that can help manage OCD and anxiety symptoms?
So I always like to tell people, especially in my line of work, people come looking for a very easy answer. And especially with something like OCD and anxiety, it's not a one size fits all. There's no nutrient or specific food that's going to help with symptoms, but there are a lot of different patterns to eating, a lot of different foods that we can be eating that are going to help alleviate symptoms. So, in general, what we find is that with people who have mental illness, there's a lot of inflammation happening in the body. And so, things like omega 3s, which are your fatty acids that are essential to your diet, can be very helpful in alleviating that inflammation. So, for example, that's found in things like nuts and fish and flax seeds. It can be found in a lot of different areas in your diet, but it's very much coming from that unprocessed food. And so, foods that are highly processed can contribute to that inflammation, can contribute to a lot of different hormonal changes in your body that will go on to affect those symptoms in your life.
Oh, so it can have impact that we're not even aware of. That's really good
Absolutely.
point. Yeah. And so when you're working with people, um, and this is something I'm just kind of throwing in there, when you're working with people, there's a strategy sometimes on how you have to talk to them and educate them on things as well, right? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about more about that, but it's that quick fix when you said, that like that waving that magic wand,
Yeah,
like I just need to do this and this will appear, but it's not that simple. So education
exactly.
is so key, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many things on the internet that you can read, but without fully understanding why it's helping, sometimes it's not overly beneficial. And sometimes reading things that are not having you being explained to you by somebody with that knowledge already can cause further anxiety and confusion because you're coming into it getting sources from all over the place, having people say all sorts of different things, and it's just overwhelming for people. And so it can be really important to, it seems like for me, as somebody who counsels all the time, I say simplifying it, but really it's just putting it in the easiest context that there's not one size fits all. You won't find that magic ingredient, but there is this education piece where there's lots of other things that you can do if you understand.
Yes, yes. And with the internet, I like that point that you brought up about, there's search, they can look in different places, but I think the key essential there is getting your information from a credible source.
Exactly.
because anybody can search, right? We can spend hours Googling for things and oh, that looks good and that looks good. And what about this? But if you go to the experts like yourself, then people can feel confident about the outcomes. I love that.
Exactly. And I'm
Thank
sure you
you.
find it all the time too, where people have gone on the internet and tried all of these different things, but they're not having somebody in that expert position explaining it and
Mhm.
talking them through to do the proper techniques or the proper steps. And so they're coming kind of
Right.
having done it in a way that wasn't necessarily beneficial for them.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense. Sure. The next question that a lot of people are asking is, can certain diets or just make sure I'm not I overstepped something here. Um, number three, can certain diets or eating patterns worsen OCD and anxiety?
Yeah, so this is the one I would really emphasize where everybody's kind of looking for that fix. It's really not necessarily about including something in your diet. Sometimes it can very much be just looking at what you're already including. So, certain things like caffeine, where if you're having a lot of caffeine, not only can it exacerbate anxiety, but it can also impact your sleep. And so, especially with something like OCD and anxiety, where you already have these racing thoughts, caffeine is not going to make that easier. And I'm not somebody who would ever say cut caffeine out of your diet completely because I get it. Coffee can be important, but it is about making sure first of all that you're having it in a moderate amount. You're having enough that you feel fueled, but not enough that you're at that jittery point where it's making that anxiety feel worse. And it can be
Right.
really beneficial to have that cutoff time with caffeine to make sure that you are still getting that sleep in so that you're not disrupting those sleep patterns. You're not causing yourself to lay awake at night, focusing even more on those thoughts. Something
Mm-hmm.
else that people really include in their diet that can impact that sleep is alcohol. So it's called a depressant for a reason, but it very much does impact sleep. It impacts mood. And so it can cause those symptoms to worsen when you're already in that down state of mind or you've already got those racing thoughts. You add this contributor to your diet that is some people view it as a relaxant. You come home from work, it's been a tough day, you have a glass of wine. Not everybody realizes how it is impacting your sleep. And so everybody knows kind of sleep is like the essential part of your life. If you're impacting it and you're not sleeping properly, things are just going to spin out of control and you have poor sleep patterns, you have poor mood. It just causes those symptoms to get worse.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
one of the other things that we do find is that a lot of people will have either irregular meal patterns or they're eating a lot of highly processed, high sugar foods. And so that's something that can very much impact your hormone balances. It can cause a lot of sugar highs and sugar crashes. And so when you're having those sugar highs, again, that anxiety can be really, really fueled. It can feel like you've got so much energy in your body and you have to think about all these things that could be causing further discomfort. But then you have that sugar crash and your hormones crash, and it causes that down state where now you feel tired, you feel gross, you're not comfortable in your body. And so, especially when you've had that high of, oh, these are all the thoughts in my head,
Mhm.
and then you have that crash, it can be really detrimental to your mental health. And so it can be really important not to completely eliminate sugar or processed foods, which are things that are like restaurant foods, chips, candies, those foods that are not necessarily coming from their natural source, but having them in moderation, having them as part of a balanced diet. And so it's kind of something that we'll go into, but really it's about making sure that you're having steady meal patterns and avoiding those sugar highs and crashes. And so even with people's meals, not necessarily a meal diet or a diet, but having irregular meal times can cause those hormone shifts as well. So having that one meal a day can cause that sugar to spike and then crash. And then you stay in a low state of blood sugar and it impacts your mood and it impacts your hormones and how your body is functioning overall, which will really just continue to be detrimental in trying to alleviate some of those symptoms.
Wow, that's so much good information. And we think that none of that, like we're just going through the motions sometimes, and we're not being mindful of what we're doing. Like maybe we're rushing to work, or we're rushing to eat our lunch and then go back to work, or we're cooking supper and all these things, and you're just going through the motions in survival mode. But really, when all those great things you just said are really essential to just stop and think about it and be able to say,
Exactly.
okay, why am I feeling this way? Instead of just doing that evolving door, right? And going in and back and forth.
Exactly.
So
Well, and
I
that's the
love
thing
that.
too, is with caffeine and alcohol, they impact your sleep, and it does become that revolving door where you're so tired that you're just going through the motions. You're not necessarily thinking, what could I have had that caused these feelings?
Mhm.
And then it just becomes this rotating door of poor sleep, anxiety, not focusing on those moments that are really important in the day that really kind of get brushed over because they're such an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm. And even for myself, if I notice for myself, if I have I can only have one cup of coffee, and then my heart starts to race. So I
Exactly.
know that if I'm going to have coffee in the evening, it has to be decaf or just water. Um, I know if I eat sugars late at night, I have trouble sleeping. So that all makes sense. And so, but there's people out there that may not know it makes sense. So that's why
Exactly.
having you here is so good. Yeah. And so when you're working, this is sort of an additional question is when you're working with clients in the hospital, what is sort of the process that you walk them through? Do you guide them through when
So
they
it
come
always
in?
starts a little bit differently. The first thing I always like to ask is if anybody's ever seen a dietitian, because there can be a lot of different feelings coming in. And so I always like to know if somebody's coming in with not preconceived notions, but feelings of unsureness. I always like to start with a bit of a diet review. And I always make it clear to people before I get into that is that I'm never here as somebody that's going to judge you or that's going to tear apart everything
Mhm.
that you're doing, because I know that that's not helpful for people either. People can be very
Mhm.
sensitive about food. It is one of those spots in life where there's a lot of feeling attached to food, even if people aren't necessarily aware of it. So that's something I really like to go in making clear is that, we're having a conversation. I'm not here sitting taking notes about how badly you're eating or about all of these things that you're telling me. I'm really just trying to learn about what you do in your meal patterns, whether you're having a breakfast and things like that. So we start off with a bit of a diet review. And then from there, I really base it on how are they feeling? Because sometimes you really get that sense right away that people are anxious about talking about food. And so it can be a very big learning curve. It can be a very big stepping point for people just to have these conversations. And so I like to base it off of those. Is if someone feels anxious, if I can tell that somebody's uncomfortable talking about things, I very much just
Mhm.
start with this is something that everybody does, everybody needs to eat. Food is fuel for your body. Your body needs food. And so it's either we're talking about ways that they can make changes based on what they're ready for, or sometimes it's not about those changes at all. It really is just about developing that relationship to start with so that they know that they can come to me with issues, but that they do feel comfortable coming to me with issues. Because
Mhm.
I'm sure in your line of work as well, people are not always ready to open up right away. And you can't force them
Mhm.
to. You can't shove all these changes on them when they're sitting apprehensive about the situation. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's really on a person to person kind of basis.
Yes, that's so true. And people feeling guilty about it maybe to come in. And when you start with that, you start the process like I'm not here to reprimand you or to discipline you. It kind of lowers the anxiety for people, right? They're like, "Whew, okay,
Exactly.
she's not gonna judge me. I'm okay." And wow, what a good approach, because I've seen it where it's very structured and you need to do this. And I remember years ago the Canada Food Guide and all the
Yeah.
different parts, and I would feel like overwhelmed, like how much did I measure that? Did I not measure that? Because I did try that a bit. So sometimes it has to be gradual. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I always call it like
Exactly.
it's not always, black or white. There could be some gray matter mixed in there.
Yeah.
So for sure. And do you have a large clientele or do you go to different areas of the hospital?
Absolutely. So I'm just based out of HSC, and so we see people who have been referred. I work under 6 different doctors who are in the hospital. So they bring patients in that have kidney disease. It could be for a number of different things. We see a lot of diabetes, but we also see a lot of autoimmune disorders. We see some people who unfortunately have had just struggles in life that have led to this kidney disease. And so especially in that setting where they're coming into these doctor's appointments, I do find that this anxiety is already high. They've got this disease. They don't necessarily understand what's causing it, but they know that they're sick. And so it's another reason why I really like to take that soft approach, is because typically they've had
Yeah.
medical professionals make comments to them before about their eating. They might not understand that. It can be people from all walks of life. So we have people coming from up north on reserves. We have people coming from Winnipeg. We've even have some doctors referred to our clinic. And so even then, it's people are coming with all sorts of different knowledge sets. People are coming in with all different types of family situations and different illnesses. And so it's very much focused on what does this person need at this time from me. So I do have quite a large bait clientele. I would say I follow about 600 patients out of HSC, which is very big.
600.
Yeah,
Oh,
but so I see some people yearly, I see some people every 6 months. Some patients I have that are very anxious about food call me once a week. And so it's very dependent on what they want from me and what stage of kidney disease they're at.
wow, that's fascinating. Really,
Yes.
it is. And your clientele, I was thinking you might say 20 or 30 or
No,
something, but that many.
I
And
know.
do you stay on with them? So when you say they called you, so when they're discharged, they can still stay in touch with you.
So typically they're followed by the doctor long term. So once they've been accepted by that doctor, they will follow that doctor until either we felt that their kidney disease is stable, or and in that case they would be discharged from the clinic, and if I know that they would like extra support, I will refer them to an outpatient dietitian who can
Okay.
continue to follow them, or I follow them until unfortunately their kidneys fail. And at that point, they go to dialysis. And then I work closely with the dialysis dietitians. So I can very well do a bit of a handover where I explain, this is what we've worked on. These are things that this patient is very worried about or that they focus on a little bit more. And that way, they're not starting fresh. They still have this dietitian coming in that has some sort of knowledge about
Mhm.
where they're at. And so it can be a very overwhelming process, but we try and make it as smooth as possible. I always like to learn a little bit about my patients' personal lives just so that we've got a bit more of a
Mm,
relationship than just me coming into the room and telling them what to do and then leaving. And that way it does
yeah.
make it a little bit easier for somebody to pick up as well, as they have a little bit of background knowledge. They can go in and start that relationship on more of a personal note than just you're a new patient, here's what we need to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Just it's not a production line, as assembly line. There's some human touch, like what I'm getting from you
Exactly.
all through this whole process of meeting with you, is that you make that personal connection. And that is
Exactly.
probably the most important piece to any success in life, right? So
Exactly.
that's amazing.
If there's
Mhm,
no
please.
connection, I find people don't necessarily want to listen to you sometimes because they don't know who you are. They don't understand what lens you're coming from. And it can very much feel like there is that barrier because there's no connection. You're just a health professional. Where if you
Mhm.
can build that relationship, you can understand who they are as a person and kind of how to approach them, then it's a little bit
Yeah.
easier for them to open up to you as well.
Yes, building that trust. Wow, I love it. Thank you. So, another question that is very common is, um, how can someone with OCD and anxiety create a balanced diet that supports mental health?
So you mentioned Canada's food guide. It has completely changed. And so it's a lot easier for people to follow nowadays. So what we recommend is a quarter of your plate, whatever plate size your plate is your protein. So that can be anything from animal meats that you typically think of, eggs, steak, chicken. It can also be more of a plant-based meal. So tofu, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils. So all of that counts in that protein portion. The second quarter of your plate, you want to be grains. So people typically have a big fear about starches and grains like rice and pasta and potatoes, but it's very essential to your body and for your brain. Your brain actually cannot function properly without those grains. So we recommend their whole grains whenever you can, but having a quarter of your plate be those grains is necessary for proper brain function. And then we want that second half of the plate. So you've got the two quarters. You want that second
Mhm.
half of that plate to be all fruits and vegetables. So whatever a person likes, and this will make sure that you're not missing any specific vitamins and minerals. It can be really important to just have cooked, raw, however you want to have your fruits and vegetables, but making sure that you are getting that larger serving of it. The reason for that is it's fiber, so it's good for your gut. It gives you all those essential vitamins and minerals. It keeps you fuller for longer because it slows down digestion. So having that plate be half fruits and vegetables is significant. But that being said, as somebody who hears diets from a large amount of people, it's often not. And so that's always my first step with people is they don't really necessarily realize what they could be doing with their fruits and vegetables. And so I do like to slowly step into that. Some people are very meat and potatoes, and I get that. I
Yes.
grew up like
Yeah.
that. So it is very
No,
slow.
I think exactly like what you're saying, people are thinking.
Exactly. So just slowly integrating fruits and vegetables into your diet can be really important, making sure that at each meal
Mhm.
you have some sort of fruit or vegetable source and going from there and
Mhm.
moving on, finding what you like, trying out different recipes. It's all a very important process in introducing that into your diet. And so it's not, like I said, it's not something that everybody's doing. It's not something that most people are doing. So it is a slow process. I always like to
Yeah.
emphasize with people, you're not going to wake up one day and be a fruit and vegetable lover and eat it every day, all day. That's not reality, but it
Right.
is something that you just slowly add into and find what you like.
Yeah. And it's got to be, I find that even working with my clients, you want to empower them to make choices instead of
Exactly.
being told. Sometimes it's easier just to remind people and then just encourage them and inspire belief in themselves that they'll find things that they like. And so when you were
Exactly.
describing that, I pictured like a little treasure hunt. You know, you're going through the store and trying to find different things that, might work for you. So
No,
yeah, just listening to you, you're just giving people so much permission and so many choices to make. And I just love that. I think it's so important because the old way of thinking was you had to do it. So you're bringing the new norm into other people's
exactly.
lives, right?
I
Yeah.
find it
Oh.
so unrealistic to just tell people what to do, and especially when it's
Mhm.
not something that they've always done, because it is a hard transition. I fully realize that. And it can be really overwhelming if you're not a person who's a big fruit and vegetable person to walk through that section in the grocery store and everything's just kind of there. There's no cooking instructions telling you what to do with them. That can be so overwhelming for people. And so
Yeah.
it very much is. Even I say, you include a bell pepper with supper tonight. Maybe tomorrow we try this, but it is that freedom to try what you can, figure out what you like, and keep building from there. It's very much like you probably do with your work, it's a building process.
Yeah. The building process. Like I picture Lego, right? One piece on top the other. So yes, that's
Exactly.
great. Thank you. And the last question we had was what role does gut health play in managing OCD and anxiety?
And so I mentioned earlier the gut. So having fiber in your gut. So your gut is actually in charge of so much more than we previously realized. So having things like probiotics and prebiotics are very much a source of fiber. What your gut does is it actually helps produce some of your hormones and some of your neurotransmitters in your body, some of them being serotonin and dopamine. And so, keeping your gut healthy helps your body to produce those hormones and those neurotransmitters that contribute to those happy feelings. And so your gut is populated with all sorts of bacteria. And so what they found is that foods like fruits and vegetables and lean meats and those fibers, yogurts and kimchi and fermented foods, it all helps to build a strong gut and a strong gut microbiome, which is a very fancy way of saying a lot of different good bacteria in your gut that are going to help you feel better. It's going to help with anxiety. It's going to help with that sadness. And in general, the better your body feels, the better you're going to feel. So if you're having issues with constipation and things like that, people feel uncomfortable with that. It gives them anxiety. It gives them those feelings of not feeling very good. And so having
Mhm.
things like fiber and things that populate that gut to help everything move the way it's supposed to and help your body feel like you're ready to be out in the world is going to be helpful for symptoms. And so even things like irritable bowel syndrome and irritable bowel disease, they've actually linked to anxiety, where if you're feeling anxious, typically that flares up and it causes worse symptoms for people. And so then it just causes worse symptoms because you're having those symptoms. And so it's really a negative cycle of needing to address my gut doesn't feel good. How can I help my gut to feel better so that I feel better? And so that's the big thing I always like to emphasize is that's why we like to push those fruits and vegetables is people don't really realize how good of a job they're doing in your gut. And you might not feel it right away. It's not going to be one of those instant, I had a vegetable, I wake up, I feel really good. But it is about slowly building that gut microbiome to help so that it can produce the things that you need it to in the rest of your body.
Mhm. Wow. So the gut, mind gut connection, that is so, so, so good. When people, so if you're able to, well, the people are in the hospital, do you find that a lot of times you can get people started on some of the suggestions you make, like so that you can start bringing the meals in on each day that those things are provided for them so they can start and transition into that mindset before discharge?
So I think it gives them a good example. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is people's ability to do things. And so we can provide them fruits and vegetables and whole grains and lean meats to try, but people
Okay.
still need those kitchen skills. They still need to have somebody who can explain to them what they're doing besides just providing those meals for them. So that's a very big thing. What we also find is there's a lot of different barriers at home. So not just food prep and body ability, but think if you're having poor mental health and sometimes you're so anxious or you're having OCD symptoms, you're not always able to prepare those meals. And so sometimes in the hospital, it really is just about problem solving for people. So some of my biggest suggestions for people are, when you're feeling really good mentally or you're feeling capable mentally, maybe making a couple meals that you can freeze. And that way, when you're having really bad anxiety, your symptoms are really bad, you're still having those foods. You're not eating that processed food because it's easy and it's the thing you can go to. Or another thing I always like to tell people is that when you're having that kind of fatigue that sometimes comes along with mental health, it may be more expensive, but sometimes it's better to just buy pre-cut fruits and vegetables because it means that that's available to you to snack on as opposed to grabbing those chips because it is something when you're struggling with your mental health, it can be very easy to just go to whatever's quickest to grab. I'm hungry, I need something in my body, but I don't have the mental capacity to think about what I'm going to prepare. Having foods available
Yes.
to you that are easy to grab, but will still be healthy and helpful for you is one of the best approaches you can take so that you can keep your body in that state of trying to eat healthy, regardless of where your symptoms are at.
Mhm. Yeah, and the part about grabbing, it may be more expensive, but in the long run, the more you can do food prep and plan ahead, it actually, I find it costs you less in the long run because
Exactly.
you've made those meal preps and you're not going out and buying fast food all the time. And so you can look at it both ways, right? The convenience of grabbing these chips, and or you can look at it at spending a little bit more money and having more meals at the end of the day. You've
Exactly.
got more in your freezer. So yes, very good. So is there
So
anything else that before um, we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience? Because I know we had the most common questions, but that doesn't mean those are only the only questions. So do you have anything else that you want the world to know about food and health?
I always just like to make it clear that going into it with this all or nothing approach that you have to be healthy or you're not, or you have to eat everything perfectly or you're ruining your body is not
Mhm.
reality. That's nobody can be perfect all the time. Nobody's going to
Mhm.
come at things with 100% accuracy. It's really
Mhm.
just about what you're able to do and making steps from there. It's not expecting you to completely transform your diet or to have this great relationship with food all of a sudden. And food's never the enemy. I said that before we got on is food is not the enemy and it can be very overwhelming for people. It's something that people view themselves as being able to control when especially they're suffering, they're having health issues, everything feels out of control. Sometimes people can become hyper fixated on food or focus on this is what I can control, this is how I need to eat. And that's not the case either. Having a healthy relationship with food is very paramount to your mental health because if you're not having a healthy relationship with this thing that does require you to eat 3 times a day, then you're not going to be in a good headspace in anything because it is very much food occupies a big portion of your life. And without that healthy relationship or going into it with negative views is just going to be detrimental to all aspects of your life.
Absolutely. Well said. So I before I let you go, and I appreciate your time so much, is there anything that you're working on right now that gets you excited or fired up?
So I love my job. We do a lot of different food research in the kidney clinics that I'm in, and the renal health clinic is where I work. And
Mhm.
so we're doing a lot of different studies that look at medication versus the ability of food to work and to help people in certain aspects of kidney disease. And so in the later stages, helping with different lab values and things like that. So we're always doing research out of HSC, which is one of the things I love about my job is being able to see how effective food can be at making changes for people and how our role is so important. Sometimes it can be easy to forget that when you're in a clinic where there's a doctor and a pharmacist and there's all these other things going on. But I love that reminder that at the end of the day, food is very important in anybody's life and it can be such a helpful tool when used in the right way.
Yes, beautiful. Oh, that's so exciting to be doing research,
It's yeah,
right?
I mean it's such an exciting time. I think nutrition has gone a little bit. There's lots of things people have said, but there's been very little research in the last however long they've been giving nutrition education. And so I'd say it's a very exciting time to be in the field in general because so much knowledge is coming out about so many different areas of food. And it's just incredible to get to be part of that and get to share that knowledge with people as it comes.
Absolutely. So you're one of the pioneers of making a change, right?
I
You
hope
are
so.
because you are. I feel that you are because things are always evolving, and every generation that comes is has something new to share with the world, right? Seeing
Exactly.
things through a different lens. And so I know that Health Science Center is an amazing hospital. It's a research hospital. They've got so many. I remember working there for a few years back in the 90s, and I remember just wanting to be around all the interns and all the doctors asking about different questions. It was so intriguing about,
Yes.
you know, what about this psychiatric disorder? What about this? You know, what about the medications? And I could never get enough. And I know that we used to have our ground rounds, was it called at the
Yeah.
time, and we would sit in and we would be done and everyone would get up and leave and I'd be like, I don't want to go. I want to stay right here with these people and learn more about what I want to get inside their heads and learn more about what they're talking about.
I find I
So
leave
I think
everything with a page worth of notes and things to research after rounds because it's so
yes.
fascinating. There's so much knowledge
Mm,
out there. And so I'm the same as you.
I
I love just
know.
hearing so many different things. I always come back with questions. I'm like, oh, I noticed you said
Yeah.
this. Can I have you
Mhm.
explain that for me?
And that's a good way to be because that's what it's the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Once you're aware of something, then you can do something about it. So here you are doing something about it. So I want to thank you so much. The last thing I'm going to ask you is if there was a billboard on um, the any corner of the city in Winnipeg, what and it was your billboard, I know yours alone, what would it say on it?
I think exactly what I said earlier is food is not the enemy. And that would be the biggest thing I want to promote to people is that food is not your enemy. Food is your friend. Food is here to fuel you. It's really just about your relationship with it. So going that would be the billboard. Food is not your enemy. And I would just want to instill that in everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I want to thank the guests for being part of this. And I want to thank everyone for bringing on the questions. And we had so much more, just not just the questions, but Sarah has provided so much more. And thank you. I'm forever grateful for you, Sarah, for doing this. And I'm hoping that the people out there listening to Sarah will stop and be able to be kind to themselves and stop long enough to realize that their life does matter. It does count. And they're worthy of change in their life so they can live a long, productive life. So I'm Sandra Wallace, the OCD Anxiety and Depression Coach. You can reach us at www.theocdcoach.com. We are always just an email away at info@theocdcoach.com and by phone, as always, at 1-204-295-4408. I'll meet you there.